Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. It's hard to believe that this is our 72nd live stream. We've spent many broadcasts talking about talking to movers and shakers, and we've introduced you to some local politicians. We've highlighted community events. We've showcased different Republican groups, and lately we've been discussing legislation. But we also would remind one another that there is a God, and He is worthy of our prayers and our consideration for the future. We saw a miracle when President Trump turned his head and avoided assassination. We're seeing corruption uncovered and illegal criminals deported. But we're also seeing Republicans unwilling to put President Trump's policies into law. Statistics say that we're going to lose the midterms, and that would not be good. So are we praying? I know I am. I've heard there's a number, maybe about 80 Republican congresspersons who are really not MAGA. And we're not going to replace them soon enough to affect the change we need in government. We're all very active in our grassroots organizations. I'm simply suggesting that we also spend a little more time in prayer. Ask God to protect our president and his cabinet, and to turn the hearts of Americans and our legislators back to integrity and justice. And I'm sure you could find a few other things in your own personal lives to pray about as well. So let us all humble ourselves and pray like 2 Chronicles 7:14 encourages us to. And with that, good morning, Mike Levine.
Good morning, Chuck. Boy, I sure do love what you just said. That's amazing. And that's the beauty. It's part of our friendship is that you bring, um, such wisdom and measure to the conversation. I just want to really thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome. Yeah, it's a complete thing. It's like we need to be doing what we're doing, but we also need some divine intervention because the what we're up against is just far greater than any of us. It's just far greater.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you something, Chuck. I'm going to say this to those people who are not as engaged as we might like for all of us to be. And of course, no disrespect intended to anyone. But what's going on in world politics today is much more interesting than what's on Seinfeld. So I would encourage
Yeah.
everyone to tune in to your Rumble channel, turn into your Getter channel, follow your legislators on X, and you're going to be very entertained because I'll tell you something, Chuck. I am 100% fascinated with all that's going on every single day, never a dull moment. And the truth is far more absurd than fiction,
Yeah.
far more absurd.
There you go. There you go.
So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to throw in before we get going about
I think we should just get started, Chuck. Let's rock and roll.
ju-
Come on.
just go ahead and get started. Well, Tuesday we were
Yes, sir.
talking about SB 44 by Senator Brian
484, right, Chuck?
Avila.
SB 484, right?
Is that? I'm sorry, that's what I thought I
You,
said, but
you glossed over it, and it
okay.
just didn't come out really clearly. I want the audience to know we're talking about SB 484, sponsored by Brian Avila, a senator from
Avila.
South Florida.
Yes, and it's a data center non-disclosure agreement. I'm just going to hit some highlights that we went over before we finish it up. It prohibits agencies from entering into non-disclosure agreements concerning discussions about prospective data center placements to the public. Now, when I went over this, the word placements kind of jumped out at me. I don't know if we hit really hard on that. It's non-disclosure agreements concerning discussions about the data center placements, I guess, locations or whatever.
Placement. That would be a geographical location, Chuck.
Yeah. So
Geographical
anyway, I just
placement,
thought
right? Mm-hmm.
thought that might
Mm-hmm.
be important to highlight before we get into 1118 toward the end. Establish a
Okay, so
fine
what we're
of a
talking about
thousand
is
dollars against
permitting.
a. I'm sorry.
This is all about permitting. Go ahead, Chuck.
Right. Establish a fine of $1,000 against a local government that enters into a non-disclosure agreement with a prospective data center applicant. I'm just moving through a couple of highlights. It establishes the state of Florida concerns that data centers and other large load customers present unique planning and land development. Well, of course, we know that. Large load tariffs are offered for public electric utilities, establishes responsibility of the state of Florida to create that, and it provides safe, reliable electric service at a fair, just, and reasonable rate. That's all very, very important. And then, of course, my bug is solar farms. How are we going to continue to invest in solar farms and still end up with reliable and fair priced electricity? That's just my bugaboo. They define large load customers as one who consumes 50 megawatts or more per average load over a 15-minute period. And then several of no policy or agreement may prohibit the curtailment or interruption of services if the curtailment or interruption is intended to provide stability of service across the electrical grid. Again, that's all very, very good. It's very important that they're not going to let these large load users interfere with us. But again, my question is, how do they do that? They're just putting together a reality that is just.
And again, if you don't mind, Chuck, I'll comment there. Because, once these things are in place, the enforcement of all of that is the next piece. And it will not be enforced if it's not in the big companies' interest to enforce it. Okay. So that's what happens all the time. Just like we were going through some previous legislation over land use, right? And it was the Blue Ribbon projects that we were doing last week. And it's the same thing. Once the developer gets the permit, you're never going to take the permit away, the entitlement away. So what they do now is they just keep coming back over and over and over and over and over again to chisel the state of Florida and local governments, when local governments have any authority over it at all. And it's the same thing in this situation. Once these people get hooked onto the grid, Chuck, they will abuse this system, and there will be no enforcement mechanism. You could also look at chemtrails. We outlawed chemtrails, but they're still spraying the clouds with chemtrail material. So passing the law, I mean, what laws are you going to enforce? So I just want to make the point right now that the real solution to this problem is, if we have any benefit at all to having data centers in Florida, those data centers should be required to produce their own energy. And the only reason they should be hooked up to the grid is to put electric into the grid, not to take it out, Chuck.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with that, Mike. And just to finish up what we discussed Tuesday, again, a good point. The Public Service Commission may not provide services to a customer who qualifies as a large load customer if the prospective customer is a foreign entity. So, I go along with that, but there's just an awful lot.
Me too, Chuck.
There's an awful lot that is uncomfortable before we even get to that point.
Again, the solution is make them provide their own energy. And I got news for you. There's a lot going on in the energy space that's going to make it very practical for these large load consumers to provide their own energy. It'll be rolled out by the end of the year. You're going to see major developments in the area of energy production, Chuck.
Right, that's awesome. I'm sure you're kind of talking about hydrogen energy. It's going to revolutionize.
Talking about fusion.
Fusion.
We're talking about, you're going to see, I'm going to use the word nuclear, power plants that no longer rely on fission, but they apply the science of fusion to the creation of nuclear energy. And that's going to be a massive development that by the end of the year is going to be much more front and center into conversation about energy production, not only in the United States and Florida, but around the world. Because once this fusion technology proves to be commercializable, sold, uh, so these fusion reactors can power the grid, which they can, based on research I've seen. So that's going to make a big difference. And it's really going to allow these big data centers, these large load consumers, to create their own energy. So why wouldn't we just get it right in 484 and oppose 1118, which is actually contradictory to 484? And we're about to get into that in a little bit here, Chuck.
Right. Well, just to kick out a few simple things here right up front. The Public Service Commission shall adopt rules of implementation by January 1 of 2027, and all public utilities must comply by January 1, 2028. And it goes on to redefine the definitions of a data center and other key terms. And then we move on. The state, it must state the intent of the legislature, and it's to determine to manage development and cooperation of large-scale data centers in Florida, respects the utilization of resources in a manner that is consistent with public interest and is not harmful to Florida water supply. So now we're moving into the water supply end of things. The intent is also to be consistent with local government zoning regulations and comprehensive plans.
Okay, Chuck. So this is another thing. We take, for people who don't pay attention, we take water for granted here in the state of Florida. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Water is not to be taken for granted. We do not have an unlimited supply of water. And as I've moaned on multiple occasions, I mean, I thought it was crazy to allow Niagara to extract, I don't know how many millions of gallons they extract out of our aquifer, but they do in Groveland, Florida, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, and bottle that stuff up and sell it all over the world. Why would we do that? This is Florida's water supply, and we're allowing corporate America to roll in here, suck it out of the ground, bottle it, and sell it all over the world as our agriculture community moans that they don't have access to enough water. And that is just crazy. So let's fix that along the way. But now you're going to bring in a data center that not only consumes inordinate amounts of electricity, but it also consumes inordinate amounts of water to keep their units and their systems cool. That's a much more difficult problem to solve, Chuck. I mean, you create forcing these data centers to create their own electricity. That's one thing. I think that's pretty overcomable. That's doable. But the impact on water supply is a much more difficult resource to manage, Chuck.
Yeah, and obviously this bill kind of addresses that. The next point is that it establishes that no water management district or the Department of Commerce may issue a permit to a large-scale data center applicant if the proposed use of water is harmful to water resources of the area. Now, again, it sounds good, but as you keep mentioning, once these people get their proposal, things change.
Oh, and by the way, Chuck, in keeping with all of the discussions we've had about growth management here in Florida, we have to remember that there's still people pouring into this state. So as we build more high density housing, more apartment complexes, more multifamily, that is also demand on the water supply. I mean, but forget about data centers. We're concerned about availability of water without the data center. And now you bring the data centers online, and it just exacerbates the complexity of the water supply issue, Chuck.
There you go. Now, also, permits and water allocations can only be issued to large-scale data centers if the following conditions are met. The water allocation is a reasonable beneficial use. It will not interfere with any legal existing use and is consistent with the public's interest.
You know, Chuck, as we discuss this and we think of all the other challenges we face and we've been working on and discussing for years and years, you and I have known each other for quite a few years now, and we, you know, others in our community who have dedicated their lives to trying to manage the legislature on issues like this. And then we go back to the Trump administration and we look at what's going on in Minnesota and Georgia with the whole election reform thing and the seizure of the 2020 ballots by the FBI yesterday with big news, right? And then we say, you know, President Trump should just play hardball with these guys. So why don't we play hardball? Why don't we just say, you know what? Data centers are banned in Florida. And then let them figure it out. Because I got news for you. If you ban data centers in Florida and data center developers want to be in Florida, what they're going to do is they're going to go out and they're going to solve all these problems. They know what the problems are. They know what the problems are better than the legislature knows what the problems are. So why don't we just ban them and let them come crawling on their knees, giving us the solutions. Hey, you shouldn't ban data centers because we've got the whole power supply thing figured out. We're going to generate our own electricity. And here's what we're going to do about water. And they'll solve all the problems. Then you can look at it and say, you know what? These guys have worked really hard and spent a lot of money creating the business model for data centers that is actually compatible with the state of Florida. So you know what? Now that they've basically showed us, because they know more about it than we do, and they know more about it than any legislator does, they've proven that they can actually do this without harming Floridians. So maybe we'll reconsider. So maybe that's the best approach, Chuck.
Well, possibly someone who cares hears that. So yeah, again,
Okay, that's
moving
interesting
along.
because someone who cares just said it.
Yeah,
So if caring is the only criterion, how about this? Someone who cares and can do something about it, right?
right. Yeah,
Because I can't really do anything about it other than moan about it on this live stream with you.
right. There you go. There you go. Well, again, we can always, anybody out there knows any politicians, you can always share our live stream with them because that's a pretty interesting perspective. So moving on down our list here, the governing board of the department shall require use of reclaimed water in lieu of a portion of proposed surface water or groundwater by a large-scale data center when a suitable reclaimed water source is available and permitted in sufficient capacity and quality to serve the applicant's needs. The applicant is capable of accessing the reclaimed water source through distribution or supply lines, and the use of reclaimed water is environmentally, economically, and technically feasible. And then finally, use of reclaimed water would not conflict with the requirements contained in the applicant's surface water discharge permit, if applicable. So those are the, I
Well,
guess,
you
the
know, Chuck,
requirements.
reclaimed water is totally unsuitable for data centers because there's so many parts per million of this mineral in there, and there's so many parts per million of that mineral in there. So reclaimed water is just absolutely incompatible with data centers. We need that nice, pristine, crystal clear spring water, you know? So I'm just trying to, you know, exemplify what happens when you say, you know, you can use, you have to use reclaimed water whenever it's applicable and whenever it's suitable and whenever it's not inconvenient for the data center, you can use reclaimed water. Oh, well, you know, now I'm a data center guy and I'm standing in front of the regulatory agency, whatever that is, probably a county commission meeting or something like that, a city council meeting. Well, reclaimed water is just absolutely unacceptable. And here's a bunch of scientific reasons why reclaimed water doesn't work for data centers. And blah, 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 Chuck. So this is pointing out the, as the legislature writes these guardrails for data centers, which I'm all for, they must have guardrails if they're going to be allowed at all. And then, you know, you just get the pitch. Have you ever sat through those meetings before? These people are smart. They come in with their gun loaded and scientific studies and, you know, endorsements by, you know, experts, industry experts. And they pitch it and they, you know, and oh, that's very compelling, right? And, you know, you get a bunch of city council people or commissioners and everything that don't know a damn thing about the subject matter, which they shouldn't. Why would they? they're citizens, our neighbors, or our city councilmen and women, and our commissioners and everything. So they don't need to be, scientists in order to sit on city council. But boy, I'll tell you one thing, when you get the University of Florida and all of those research organizations, the universities around the state, weighing in with their scientific analysis of why reclaimed water doesn't work for data centers, it's going to be, believe me, they're going to make a compelling argument. So you can say whatever you want about reclaimed water. They're just going to disprove it. And next thing you know, they're doing surface water and groundwater, Chuck.
There we go.
I hope that
Well,
wasn't
let's,
too convoluted, because if you think what I just said was convoluted, wait until you hear the argument.
there you go. Well, we're going to finish. The final statement I want to make on SB 484 is that the Water Management District may not approve an applicant's permit without a hearing. So, any final remarks on 44 before we jump
Well,
over to
isn't that
SB?
interesting, right? Because we can approve high density multifamily housing projects without a hearing, but a data center's got to have a hearing at the water management district in order to get their water permit approved, which I am totally for. But it
That's
just
good.
goes to show you, right, on a case by case, how hypocritical the Florida legislature and everyone else who is required in order to sign legislation into law, how hypocritical those positions are. So, on one hand, we have hugely impactful legislation that cannot be denied and no hearing is allowed. And on the other hand, if you really get, now you get into the water supply where hearings are mandatory. So, which is it, Florida legislature and frankly, Governor DeSantis? Which is it? Do we need local involvement in these local projects, or is the ultimate wisdom of the state enough to wave the magic wand and approve highly impactful projects in our local communities, Chuck? That's the question to be answered. Why don't we just be consistent and let local government weigh in on all of it?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. So now, again, we're moving right through our time here, and so let's switch over to SB 1118 again by Senator Brian Avila, and
Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the same guy that wrote 484, which Chuck and I support. Okay, I mean, it's better than nothing. Okay, so we're going to support it, because if we don't, we get nothing. And now we're going to talk about 1118, sponsored by the same senator. Go ahead, Chuck.
yeah, so I guess the biggest glaring issue is these non-disclosure agreements. It requires now requires local governments to comply with requests for confidentiality made by anyone who requests confidentiality when the request involves the entity's plans, intentions, or interests in developing a data center. So, what is the non-disclosure about? It is simply about the location or the ideas. What are they trying to
Well, as
do
we go through
here?
the bill, you're going to see, Chuck, that it's
Hmm.
not so much about the location as it is proprietary business secrets. So, for example, I mean, obviously this is cutting edge technology that we're talking about. And these companies don't want to reveal to the rest of the world not only the location of their data center, but the technology that's associated with it. But I would suggest that every business that ever needed to get a permit had to go through the same process. So get your science patented so no one can copy it. Protect yourself from the intellectual property thievery that goes on, and get your ducks in a row, so it doesn't take a million years to understand what you're doing and get your permit approved. Because once your permit is approved, you're done. You're protected. Again, because as we'll find out as we go through this bill, the confidentiality is only for 12 months, right?
Yeah, that's the
Would you
next
say
comment.
only? I mean, 12 months, again, like my friend Steve Bannon says, there are decades in which nothing happens, and then there are days when decades happen. And that's true. If you think through that for a second, let that sink in. But so the big deal here is, before you make your application, you read the law. that Senator Avila's put forward. You check the boxes on your side before you present. You walk in with your ducks in a row and you get your permit approved. I mean, that's the process. So, you know, the big deal there, Chuck, is that, and again, keep in mind, I mean, look at the comments that we're making on this legislation right now, you and me, and then think of the public outrage that could possibly be associated with the disclosure that a data center is about to put a massive data center, could be as big as a city, in your backyard, and they want to keep it quiet until the permit is approved and just basically keep the public conversation out of it because they know that there's going to be some pushback on this, Chuck. That is the underlying, in my opinion, among other things. There are valid reasons why businesses would not want their proprietary business secrets divulged to the public. I get it, right? But the big enchilada here is public opinion, Chuck.
Yeah, well, again, the next point in our little list here is a big however. The local government must disclose that the project is a data center. Now, I'm a little confused here, Mike.
Well, basically, that's what you're saying, Chuck, that they can't hide the fact that it's a data center. But when it gets into we just covered a lot of stuff, a lot of very specific resources that are required in order to put one of these up. So all it said was you've got to disclose that there is a permit on a certain location, and that permit is to put a data center there. End of story. Okay, you're going to get a one-liner from the county commission or the city council that, a little flag in the ground that says there's going to be a hearing on this, which there may not be. And, but the point is that when, we've all, I guess, maybe not all, but many of us notice that, you'll get a little sign in the ground in front of a property that says there's a land use change scheduled for this property. And if you want to weigh in on it, you got to come to the commission meeting or whatever. Right. So the question becomes, now we disclose there's going to be there's application to put a data center in this particular location. Okay. But that's all you know. So they don't tell you that they're going to consume 50 megawatts of electricity in a 15-minute time period, and they consume an unbelievable amount of water, and your electric bill is going to go up, and your water bill is going to go up, and you can have brownouts in your communities because these data centers are hogs for resources, Chuck. So that is the most minimal requirement available under this topic, Chuck.
Yeah, so just to kind of bring this down, because that's the most glaring thing. Most of this is talking about what information is to be held in confidence, and it defines the proprietary business information as information that's owned or controlled by the person requesting the confidentiality. So I guess it is kind of talking about the intricacies of that particular company. And again, we just have a few minutes. So again, so the final pieces we have is upon passage of SB 1118 establishes that the state of Florida finds it to be a public necessity to provide confidentiality for a period of time, that's 1 year, for certain information for certain persons who are interested in locating a data center in Florida. And again, upon passage, SB 1118 establishes that the state of Florida benefits from treating the identity of a certain individual or individuals, the prospective location of a potential data center. So now there's, I just lose sight of this. They have to say this thing is a data center, but they don't have to tell you where it is. I'm a little confused there.
No,
Upon
they do.
passage
The
of
location
SB,
is location. So they're going to tell you where it is. They're just not going to tell you who it is.
okay, well, I guess I read that as saying.
So here's the bottom line, Chuck. The Florida legislature believes that it is a necessity in the best interest of the people of the state of Florida to keep this confidential. Who works for who, Chuck? Right? So basically, it's in the state of Florida, it's a necessity, was the key word that jumped out at me, a necessity that we keep this confidential. No, the Florida legislature and every government agency in this state works for the private sector people who pay the taxes. So it isn't for the government to keep stuff away from us. Okay. So this is just a completely upside down view of the role of government. This is so important that you can't know about it until we get it sorted out. And then after we get it sorted out, we can tell you about it. No, it works the other way, ladies and gentlemen. We get to learn about it, then we tell you what we like about it, what we don't, and then you regulate these industries in our best interest. That's the way it works, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, at least that's how it should work. Well, Mike, it's hard to believe we are out of time. I'm wondering if you want to give a final retort over 484 and 1118.
I just did it, Chuck. I have nothing more to say about the matter.
Okay, well then, I
Okay.
guess I can go over to my thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic, or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program, and remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.